Hello, I would like to say that it is morning, but it isn't. It is, well, it's getting on for 1:15 and time to make some lunch. But I've spent pretty much all morning washing and picking and washing more apples. I'm getting a little bit overwhelmed with how many apples we have to deal with. I have them laid out on tea towels on the worktop at the moment, drying. So when they're dry, I will grade them. So, well, I'll show you. I'll take us into the kitchen and I'll show you. About half of these I picked today, and about half of them have dropped over the last few days because we've had quite a lot of strong winds lately. So I'm just letting them dry off and then I'm going to grade them. So, for example, this one here has a little hole in, but it should be okay for a certain amount of time. And then this one is nice and sound, so I can put this one in a box to go upstairs to store for a bit longer, so I don't have to deal with it right now. But then of course I've got ones that, well, this one has had its own damage at some point. It's actually sealed, so technically it's not actually doing anything, so it doesn't have to be used in the next couple of days. But let me find another one. Some of them that are bruised from dropping, they'll want using up because otherwise they turn quite quickly. So we're all fed and watered and dry and frizzy also because I've been out in the wind. So John's going to plant the garlic today. We tend to plant our garlic in October. We have planted it as late as December before, but it does seem to do better planted before the winter. So he's separated lots of little cloves out of the garlic from this year's garlic harvest. So I'm going to take the camera down and show you what he's doing. I will music over the top because it will be very windy. It's not very windy today, but kind of normal standard wind is still pretty blustery. So we'll head outside for a bit of fresh air, I think. Okay, back in where it's a little bit warmer. It's definitely warmer today. It's 18 in here. It was 12 yesterday at its warmest. It was pretty cold yesterday. So I've been looking at what to cook for tea. Originally, I was thinking I could put a lot of stuff in the oven because I have several recipes that I want to try over the next week that involve squash and roast squash. So it's going to roast a whole bunch of squash for the recipes, but I'm not so sure now because most of them I need to roast like garlic and onions and stuff with them, and I don't know if I want to bake something with apple in today, so I'm not sure. It might end up being risotto instead. So I'll show you the recipes anyway that I'm planning on making, but I will be obviously adapting them because I can't leave well enough alone. So I'm always printing off recipes off things like Pinterest or photocopying out of mum's like recipe magazines that she gets. So this one I got online is for squash, onion and spinach tart. That one has got onions in as well. and you have to have roast squash to put in the tart. So I think I'll roast some squash and onion together for the tart, and then I will put the roast onion and squash labelled in the fridge, ready to make the tart another day. And then I've got this creamy pumpkin and leek gratin. This one, you roast the squash and then you cook everything else separate, and then put all the sauce on and then put it under the grill for 5 minutes. But I don't see the point in like frying onions separate and frying leeks separate. I will roast them at the same time as the squash and make the bechamel on the day I want to have it. So I can just put all the roast vegetables in a tray, put on the sauce and stick it in the oven. So that's the plan with that one. This one is for, I'm trying to read through the viewfinder here, black bean pumpkin chili, and it uses pureed pumpkin. Now canned or tins of pureed pumpkin is really tricky to get up here. I had to order some online for some other recipes, for some of the kind of sweet recipes. So what I'm going to do instead is just roast some extra squash for this chili. Again, I've got a roast squash for that. And then I've got roasted butternut squash and tomato soup, and again you're roasting it with the garlic. So my plan, I'm thinking, if I flip this round, so my plan is, I think, is to have one day where I just fill up various trays with squash and onions or garlic or whatever it is supposed to be for each recipe. Put them in all different trays, roast them all, and then when they're cooled I can put them in containers and put them in the fridge, and then each day for whichever recipe I want I can just pull them out. So for the tart I can just pull them out, make up the tart, stick it in the oven. And in theory that should be okay to bake other things with at the same time, because you're not really roasting the onions, they'll have other ingredients mixed in with them at that point. Or with the gratin, once the vegetables, you're putting the cheesy sauce on. I think it's cheesy. Is it cheesy? Or just creamy? Yeah, it's cheesy. So again, you're kind of smothering that onionness. So I'd be able to bake, say, muffins or something like that at the same time. So I'm not sure if I want to do that today or not, or whether to bake something appley. It's just, there's so many apples. Okay, first things first, I need some space in here. So I need to grade these apples. I've got a box over here, and I'm just going to lay a layer in the bottom of the box. And I don't think it'll take up any more room because there's plenty of apples here that are kind of a bit damaged. So I think that's the first port of call, is how damaged is each apple and will they survive if I put them in the box. Thing is, they won't be in storage for a huge amount of time. I'm not planning on keeping them all winter or anything like that. It's just making less apples that I have to deal with in the immediate future. Whereas some, like that one that's gotten quite bruised when it's fell off the tree, is obviously going to need to be used up in the next couple of weeks. So that's the first job. So there's actually more apples here that are really good than I thought they would be, which is a good thing. There's obviously more than one layer's worth, and there is a colander full of decent apples already put upstairs where it's cooler. So I think I'll ask John when he comes in from the garden how his parents store their apples. Well, I know they wrap their apples individually because they keep theirs like throughout the whole winter. But I just want to double check what they wrap them in. I think they wrap them in newspaper. I still have a fair few here that I've got damage to them, but they're not, they're damaged, but they're not to the point where they're going to go bad within like 24 hours or 48 hours, because that's obviously been slug damaged, but it's dried up whilst it's been on the tree, so it's kind of healed itself. Same with like this one that's got some damage. It's probably had a twig or a branch or something catch it. But again, it's kind of dried up and healed, although that one's actually bruised. So forget what I said about that one. But if I look at, say, this one that's been nibbled, again, the tree is, the apple has healed itself over. And same here, where it's been damaged, it's healed over. So this will last, I won't need to use this for up to a week probably, before it starts to get a bit like it's looking like it needs to be used. But other ones, say, well, like the one I showed you with the big bruising, which I've lost now, but there's one here with the bruising, that's going to go bad quite quickly. I have one over there in the fruit bowl, in my to be used immediately pile, that basically the rest of the apple I think has pretty much gone over by now. But I can only use some of them up so quickly, so I'm going to try my best to work through the ones that really need to be used straight away. So I think I'm going to do all that roast squash prep tomorrow and start fresh. Last night, rather, I blocked the bottom rib that I've done so far on this Let's Boogie sweater, because I wasn't happy with the way it was sitting and the way it was attached. I've got the camera a little bit further back from me today, this evening, because I don't want to go get the tripod. But I wasn't happy with how it joined to the body. But then I never really am with rib. But once I blocked it, like since I blocked it last night, it's sitting much more flat, and rather than sitting quite so proud. So I've tried it on again, and I think I'm just going to kind of leave it around about the length it already is. I was going to lengthen it, but I only have a little bit of yarn. Well, I have got more upstairs, but I'd have to cake it up. And to be honest, I don't think it's going to make much difference to how I feel about the garment. I'm kind of regretting not making it a little bit bigger on the body. It's not tight or anything like that, it's just it isn't as loose as I would like it, but it's just a little bit clingy. And I did put a little bit of waist shaping in this that I completely regret, because it didn't end up needing it. Well, I do like a bit of waist shaping so that it doesn't just hang from the bust straight down, but because the garment is relatively short, I wish I'd put the waist shaping in higher up and then kicked it back out again, but I didn't. I forgot about doing waist shaping until quite late on, so it's kind of down here when it should have been up here. So I'm not sure. To fix it, I would have to rip out pretty much all of the body that I've knit, and I don't really want to do that, not at this late stage in the game. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to cast off the sweater and leave it as is for the moment, and then see how I end up wearing it. And if it's not getting enough wear, then I will change it, because I'm not adverse to changing a garment several months or even a year or two down the line if it isn't getting the wear that it deserves. So I've often made a rib bigger or a button band bigger if I'm not happy with it, or lengthened sleeves and things like that. So I think that's what I'm going to do. I suspect I'm going to have to rip out the body on this up to just below the underarm, so probably an inch down, then do the waist shaping just below the bust line, and then flare it back out a bit so it's just a little bit looser on the belly. Like it says, it's not tight, it's just that it sits right against the body, and I prefer to have a little bit of, I mean, it has positive ease, but a little bit extra more positive ease. So, but there we go. That's just one of the things with knitting an item. Sometimes you end up having to chop and change things a lot to just make it just how you want, but that's also the beauty of making something yourself, is you can change stuff. And especially with knitting or with crochet, you can rip out and you can adjust things relatively easily. The only exception would be when you've steeked a garment, and I have a cardigan that if it hadn't been steeked I would make adjustments to, but unfortunately I can't. Okay, so I think I'm going to leave that here for today and pick back up again tomorrow. Bye bye.